Hey guys, I think I'm live right now, and I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jazear from Sifchain, and the title of the talk is "To Ethereum and Beyond: The Future of Interoperability Between Cosmos Network and External Blockchains." So this talk is about the work that we did, continuing basically some work that was researched by Swish Labs, funded by the Interchain Foundation, to bridge Cosmos and Ethereum, and then what that is going to look like as it gets deployed. First, for a bit about Sif and Sifchain. Sifchain's mission is to be an omni-chain decentralized exchange. Sifchain will simplify development costs, and then liquidity from all cryptocurrencies can be accessed on-chain, allowing the coordinated deployment of capital by cryptocurrencies, for all cryptocurrencies by DAOs. And the general concept here is that Cosmos is an interchain focused blockchain, which is really awesome. But in order to make it fully interchain, it needs to connect to a variety of chains. We've seen a lot of research and talks already on Peggy, and we'll talk a bit more about it here. But Peggy is only for one blockchain. It's only for Ethereum. And even if we add a couple of the other blockchains like Celo and Bitcoin that we've discussed here, it doesn't give us the totality of blockchains. Whereas for Sifchain, we're hoping that we can get peg zones for all of the major blockchains to Cosmos as well, so they can truly live out that interoperable interchain mandate. And at the same time, we're basically just focused on Ethereum, and so I want to dive deeper into that. But I want to dive into it more from a forward-looking approach beyond, say, the basics that we've seen from a lot of the traditional Alpha Peggy docs. And Sif, who you saw in the earlier slide, is the namesake of Sifchain. She represents things like abundance and community, and this general sense that we have that the community should be in control of as many of the blockchain projects as we can get. So we'll explain how that relates to our version of Peggy in a little bit more detail. First, just as a general note on Sifchain, it has a live testnet with over 100 validators. And those validators are using Peggy in a live testnet that's connected to Ropsten, which is an Ethereum testnet, and a Cosmos network chain, the Sifchain itself. So if you're interested in playing with Peggy and Sifchain, I definitely encourage you to take a look. There's a link to our Discord a bit later in this talk, and so you can get some instructions there. You can also go on GitHub to get a README and follow that. We've released a lot of tutorial videos on how to connect to Sifchain and run a node, and also on how to use Peggy on Sifchain, so I won't belabor that here. But it does work really smoothly. There's a standing testnet, so feel free to just play with it at your leisure and kick the tires. But that cross chain between Ethereum and Cosmos is working, and we're really excited to explain that. We'll hammer that point in more detail because we've done it a lot for our community, but we're still trying to get that message out to the broader Cosmos community that you can actually use a standing version of Peggy already. We also have live token pooling and swaps. So not only can you, say, take a token from Ethereum and move it onto Sifchain, but you can also swap that token in a Sifchain liquidity pool, or you can pool it to receive tokens. So again, all of this stuff is running with a pretty solid community, and we'd love to get any feedback or engagement from the broader Cosmos community. So this is the front end, by the way. This is sort of the next generation of Sifchain, which I'd say we need to get done along with a bit more marketing prior to our testnet, prior to our mainnet. So just to go over the Peggy timeline here, it was started around September 2017 when June Park won a Hack Atom 2 with a Peggy implementation, and June later joined Tendermint. Before that, there were some architecture diagrams created by Jaquan and a general plan for how you could integrate a fast finality blockchain like Tendermint with a blockchain that didn't have fast finality, but we didn't really have solid working code. Swish Labs, where I worked for a while, took that project and extended it dramatically with multiple versions of Peggy that were funded from grants from the Interchain Foundation. And funny story, actually, a lot of the work that we did in the original version of Peggy was deeply inspired by the work we had already done for Thorchain. So two cross-chain projects with very different sponsors, but actually there's a decent amount of overlap between the original code bases for the two. And then in 2020, Althea started Althea Peggy, also funded by a grant from the Interchain Foundation. But this was more focused on the router use case. So Althea, as you have seen from a previous conversation, is focused on actually getting decentralized payers to pay for their routers, but not just using fiat currency. And decentralized sort of mesh network is obviously extremely solid for the world, but you wouldn't want to do something like that if you didn't have a cryptocurrency supporting it. And so it made perfect sense for Althea to get involved in Peggy. But then beyond that, Althea partnered with Inclusion to do further work on Peggy JV, which I believe has been described before as a general DeFi project. And in 2020, Sifchains deployed a standing testnet with Peggy, but then based on the decentralized use case. And I think this is kind of an abbreviated timeline because it doesn't go over some of the other cross-chain projects that have been in development from teams like Bluezil or Secret Network that also do Ethereum compatibility with Cosmos. I think that the vision for the Cosmos ecosystem is one where there are a lot of different peg zones and a lot of different architectures. We're going to go over how Sifchains differs from Althea, but again, there are a lot of other visions that have been shared with the broader community. So the biggest difference I'd say between Althea Peggy and Sifchain's deployment of Peggy is the consensus model for the peg zone itself. So in both cases, you take an Ethereum wallet, send it to a Peggy smart contract, and then that smart contract is simultaneously run by a set of validators that deploy some tokens, some peg tokens onto a Cosmos network wallet. The big difference with Sifchain and Althea is that with Althea, it's effectively a proof of authority system. The peg zone validators all have to agree with each other, but if they agree with each other, then they're effectively considered trusted for the work they've done by themselves. And so the authority is not as, say, restrictive as the authority for something like a secret network or for a wormhole, the Solana Ethereum project, where there are only a small number of validators that can actually secure the bridge. But nonetheless, it's kind of proof of authority in that you have to trust the collective validator set for something that they weren't originally crypto-economically incentivized to provide value for. So obviously, we all know that Tendermint is very secure for for like transactions that are on a network themselves, but they're not necessarily solid for transactions that are happening on adjacent networks. And so there's a problem which Althea mentions in greater detail with the proof of authority model, but they did want to get something out, and thus it did make sense to release. But with Sifchain, we've taken a little bit of a different approach where we have a staked threshold Tendermint consensus for the peg zone. What that means is that the Peggy validators for Sifchain actually have to stake in order to serve as peg zone validators. And they're in a separate chain from Sifchain itself, which means that the peg zone is ripe for use with other blockchains. So we can connect our peg zone to a Kava or to a Kosh or to Terra or any of these other cryptocurrencies, but they don't have to trust the Sifchain validator set. They can trust a separate peg zone validator set that is incentivized specifically to handle Peggy transactions. And they have things like minting and block rewards and so on that you'd expect from any other blockchain, but it's just focused on the peg zone use case. So we feel like that gives a bit of extra security for reasons I'll show in a moment. So if you look at the Althea design specification on the right, what we see is that validators are fully trusted to manage the bridge, as I mentioned, and there is the corner case where the assets on the bridge exceed the market cap of the native token. And so in the Althea Peggy design, again, it's really solid for getting something up and out there for the router use case, and potentially for other extensions that they're considering. But it doesn't really deal with the idea that there may be more demand for Peggy than is originally anticipated, because of because if it would, then those validators could potentially steal the money in the Peggy smart contract. That's really something we wanted to avoid. So with Sifchain, what we've done is we've allowed the source asset that any depositor actually sends to a wallet. We've over collateralized that, and then we've had them pay a service rate. And so that service rate is sent again to its own sovereign blockchain, its own PegZone sovereign blockchain, which has its own block rewards and also its own inflation rate. And so this means that theoretically, the PegZone that we deploy could have people with demand for dramatically more use of Peggy than we actually anticipated, or than that Sifchain itself can secure, or even than the Cosmos Hub can secure. But that PegZone can still operate in a way that's crypto economically secure. So we're super excited about that. And our expectation here is that the PegZone staking derivatives will help decrease the capital cost for staking with Peggy. There's a huge problem with Peggy in that if Peggy is used with the model that we've suggested, then it does mean that validators are going to need to lock up additional amounts of capital beyond what they would lock up for the Sifchain validators, and they would only use that to support Peggy. And so the staking reward, or the service rate that they get plus the staking rewards, would have to be larger than any of the other projects that they'd be crypto economically incentivized to deploy capital to. But with staking derivatives from groups like Chorus One, we're hoping to decrease the capital cost for staking with Peggy. The other thing that I'd say really drives up the interest for Peggy, and thus people's willingness to deploy capital across the bridge, is the strong Cosmos network projects. So we think crypto economically that a lot of the incentives for people to pay that service rate are going to be met by them pooling things in pooling that same capital in Sifchain's liquidity pools, or in the validation for Peggy itself. But beyond that, these PegZone stakers, if they know that, these PegZone users, if they know that they can get additional returns from something like lending on margin, or the use of something like a Kava, or the work that bHarvest is doing for its own DEX, if they feel like they can get solid returns on their capital, that's more of an incentive for them to use Peggy and pay that service rate. So we generally feel like we want a robust Cosmos network ecosystem in which all of the projects are strong, or at least we have a large number of strong projects, and that those strong projects can collectively incentivize people to move their capital across the PegZone. And by doing this, we basically see the PegZone being its own sovereign peg that supports the entire class. That supports commerce across the entire Cosmos ecosystem, and gives Ethereum users their first opportunity to really appreciate the faster transaction speeds, the lower transaction costs, and so forth, until there's a point where people are moving their tokens across the PegZone in larger chunks, and it's not just for Sifchain, it's for the community itself. So this is our plan. This is what we expect to do for the Ethereum bridge. And then I would say, just going back a couple of slides, we hope that we can use this same model for other PegZones in the future. So we've looked at the work that Nomic has done on Bitcoin. I thought that was a really exciting talk. And some other work that other chains have done as well for connections to Cosmos. And we hope to replicate it for groups like Tron or Stellar or Cardano, and then really make the Cosmos network like the default hub for all cross-chain. So I'm going to stop here, see if there are any questions. But yeah, thanks so much for participating.
All right, so while we wait for some questions, do you have any common misconceptions or anything you want to talk about before we transition?
Hmm. I think talking points for Sifchain, I don't know if there are misconceptions so much that we are just generally doing broadcasting in general. Sifchain is a DeFi play over a pure tech play, since we're taking a lot of tech work that we've already built from Peggy. Um, and a lot of the cross-chain work was relatively simple to build, given that Thorchain was a reference implementation. So I would say the next things for us to really advertise um, are the liquidity mining program we actually can launch, which is coming out relatively soon. I think that we're pretty excited to fund a lot of ecosystem participation through liquidity mining between the poolers themselves, which always get liquidity mining rewards, and the validators and swappers and people who refer people to the chain who are also getting liquidity mining rewards, which I think is a new thing for most dexes. I'd say people are pretty incentivized to participate in Sifchain in some way um, in general. So that's maybe something that I wouldn't say is a misconception, but we definitely want to make sure people are aware of. Maybe aside from that is that we'd be launching relatively soon. And so, I'd say people should look out for that in early January. We are at this point just doing security updates. We have a continuous auditor constantly evaluating our work, sending out an audit report internally every month. So we're pretty fine there. Yeah, I don't know if there are any misconceptions, but I definitely would want to share that info with people as well.
All right, great. Do you have any Twitter handle or anything in case people have additional questions? They can just ping you afterwards.
Oh yeah, definitely message us at Sifchain.
Do you want to drop the link into the chat?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm surprised when I unveil the kimono a bit and say, "Hold on, can you still hear me?"
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's one extra slide that I'm hoping to perfect.
So I think one question came in. It was from Gregory from Regan. He wants to know what is the ideal relationship between SIF and Cosmos Hub from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the way we see, I'm just going to toss up our contact info. The way we see the Cosmos Hub is that it's designed to support all Cosmos projects, and that it's in theory a DAO, which actually would fund Cosmos projects, but that hasn't really come to fruition. More so because the Cosmos Hub is figuring out its own governance structure. I remember sending a lot of content out maybe several months back describing like what it would be like to govern Cosmos Hub as a DAO. But that had like a really solid funding ask for it. And we ended up, instead of getting that funding from the Cosmos Hub, getting it from venture capital, which allows us to kind of move forward at the pace and I'd say the pace and the technical completion that we would want for our vision for Sifchain. But that doesn't mean that the hub can't be a strong commercial partner. I think that even if it's not funding for development itself, which may come up over time, I've seen actually some really great proposals from people like Gregory and Regen around improving Cosmos funding. But even if that's not the case, I think that the like $1 billion+ worth of Atom is extremely useful as collateral or as a token that is traded in the liquidity pools. So we definitely want to have participatory commerce there. There's a sort of joint decentralized exchange model that we've been floating around with a couple of partners, whereby if users want to swap between two tokens, they may not, instead of just using Rowan as a settlement token, they can use multiple settlement tokens. And that potentially could mean Atom for the liquidity pool program that bHarvest is setting up. So then there's like more of a business development partnership. I know that Cosmos is kind of working on more of the go-to-market business development side whereas Sifchain has a pretty strong BD network and is like actively going after a lot of partnerships. But there's just no way that Rowan has the same amount of capital that Cosmos does. And so there's some kind of a symbiotic relationship that's available there as well. Yeah, I would say that the Cosmos Hub, in my mind, because it should support all Cosmos SDK projects, should in some way have aligned crypto economic incentives for Sifchain, and so we're trying to figure out ways to make that happen. Another one would be shared security. We've spec'd out ways that the Atom holders in the Cosmos Hub can validate or at least provide crypto economic support for validation on Sifchain. So I think it's really just around the Cosmos Hub to productize its liquidity. It's kind of already productized its technical resources, and by doing those things, it makes it easier for Sifchain to collaborate.
All right, awesome. This was a really great talk. So what we're going to do, unless you have any final thoughts, we're going to take a short break and start our next session in 15 minutes.
Cool, awesome. All right, yeah, looking forward to the next session.
Awesome, thanks so much.
All right, cheers.